The yams. Gotta eat the yams. The yams. Gotta eat the yams. The yams. I gotta eat the yams. The yams. Cause I gotta eat the yams. Oh shit. Whoops. Cause I gotta eat the yams. The yams. And I gotta eat the yams. The yams. I gotta eat the yams. The yams. And I gotta eat the yams. The yams. I got what's up, Jazz? What's up, Lightning? Copy video. URL so the live chat displays properly. Cause if it doesn't, it will end my life. What's up, type side? Yeah, I think it's been long enough, and as much I tried to record first part of the review, but I'm gonna try to do this. This is gonna be kind of non-traditional in the sense that, like, the way I'm gonna handle this is I'm not gonna pay attention to the chat as much, and the only reason why is because when people watch the playback, I want them to hear the points and not me discussing things with you guys. So I'm gonna go like a good stretch without acknowledging the chat at all, and then I'll take a break, and then I'll do another stretch, and I'll do it like that. Primarily because I want to get my main points out. And first, I'm taking Tylenol because my head hurts. All right, so that's how we're gonna do it. I've been good, Lightning. Hopefully, you've been well. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna handle this in sections. I'm gonna start with like story, character stuff. The second part will be gameplay, and then the third part will be conclusion. So that's the general idea how I'm gonna go about it. Yeah, this will be the last Manic episode before Christmas. It won't be the last. I might turn this. Well, hold on. What day is December 31st? Is what? I might try to do. I might turn next week's episode into like a end of the year rant. Which, if you guys have followed me for a while, you know I do those every year. I might do that. I haven't decided because the end of the year rant usually was like a life kind of update versus like an actual like gaming topic discussion. So I haven't decided yet. My schedule this week is really going to be I have to go to work tomorrow and then I'm off until next Monday. So realistically, I have one day of work, Christmas, and then I come back next Monday to work, and then I only work for like what, 2 days? Yeah, 2 days. Then we're off for New Year's, and then I come back to work for another 2 days. So that's how the schedule is gonna go. So it is. Let's see. I don't want to have too much preamble on this, so we're not gonna go that much further with it. But we'll, yeah, I think we're just gonna get into it. So, like I said, I won't be really responding to the chat in this first section. So if you say things, it's cool. Comments are cool. I'll try to catch up with everything after I get through the first section. Because if I read the chat while reviewing, it's going to fuck me up, and I'm going to lose a lot of focus. So I'm actually going to minimize the stream for a second so I don't see anything. Because me looking at the chat is going to fuck me up. So that's why I'm not doing it. So, with all that being said, let's get into the Pokemon Sword and Shield review. So the first section is going to be on story and characters. And for me personally, I think, alright, so I guess I need to give you a context of how I feel about the game's stories up until this point. I thought it was a slow progression forward all the way up until about Black and White. After we hit Black and White, I felt like 6, 7, and 8. They all have their own various problems. And not saying Gen 5 was perfect, but Gen 5 was definitely a step above, whereas I felt like 6 was a drop off. 7 is an improvement, and I think 8's an improvement. I don't think it's as good as Gen 5's story, but it's definitely an improvement off of the last 2 gens we've had. I think the main problem I have with Generation 8 as a whole, and I feel like this is a way you can, and not only with the story and characters, I just mean in general, is it baby steps. That's the problem I think Gen 8 overall has. That we have the ability to go like leaps and bounds for it, but what Game Freak wants to do is these little hops. These little hops. And not saying they're not progression, but they're like hops. And you're like, yo, like this is cool for like the handheld era because there's not a lot you can do with the handhelds. But like when you're on a console, like a home, it's like going from like the Game Boy Advance to the fucking PlayStation 4. Like there's a lot more you should be doing, and that's what's not getting done. So in the premise of the characters, first thing I'll say this. Generation 7 gets a lot of praise because it does character dynamics really well. Generation 7 fixed one of my biggest complaints with Generation 6, which was the fact that they really didn't give a fuck about most of the characters in Gen 6. Gen 7 fixes that, although I think I like the cohesion of Generation 8's cast more than Generation 7's. I don't want to take away from Gen 7, but I need to acknowledge that Gen 7, I think, if we were being objective, does their characters overall better, but I feel like the flow of the characters fit way better in Gen 8. But I can respect that Gen 7 has a lot of lore and a lot of respect towards its entire cast, not just, you know, your rivals and shit. But I do want to give credit where credit's due. First things first, Hop is the best rival we've had since like Sharon, N, Bianca, and Hugh to a lesser extent. Because as much as people want to say Serena, Tyranno, Trevor, and who am I missing? Shauna don't come close. How is a disappointment. Gladion is a better rival than How is. And Gladion isn't really meant to be a traditional rival. So I would say openly, Hop is the best rival we've gotten since 2012, I want to say. Yeah, 2012, I think he's the best main rival we've had. A lot of people give him a lot of shit because he's very annoying, like Barry is at the beginning of his journey. The difference is, and I give credit. Barry had other elements to him. The problem with Barry is that he was like 80% like annoying and like 20% like an actual character. Hop, I think it's a little bit more balanced. I think it's more like a 60-40 split, 60 or 50-50 kind of split, where Hop has this shit going on with him and his brother and how he feels inadequate. So a lot of his personality comes off to me as him trying hard to like make a name for himself. Like he feels like he needs to live up to his brother's legacy, so he tries way too hard. That's one of the reasons why when you get to like, I want to say it's not, it's around like, it's not halfway. It's like around halfway through the game when he fights, when you and Bede have fought a few times and then he goes to fight Bede after you fight Bede. And then you find out, apparently, that he lost to Bede, and that fucked his confidence up. Because it's not that Hop has an issue with losing, it's that Hop sets like these standards for himself. And one of the standards was that you and him were rivals. So if he lost to you, it was like you guys were on equal footing. He was cool with that. But when he lost to Bede, especially when you beat Bede, that's a cool story beat. That fucks him up for a while. Like Hop is trying to get, and it's reflected in his team composition. He's trying to get his shit together for at least, I want to say for a while, like a good chunk after it, because it messed him up, and he had to rethink the way he wanted to handle things, and he started experimenting, which is what you do in life. Sometimes you fuck up, and you have to rethink what you want to do in life and what your goals are going to be, but you have to kind of get out there and experiment a little bit to get to that point. That's the part about a Hop's character I really fucking enjoy. That it isn't just straightforward, he's the same character the whole way through. He starts changing like halfway through the fucking game. So I think Hop is a better rival than he's given credit for because of the way he's portrayed initially. Moving on to Bede and Marnie. So Bede and Marnie, I personally prefer like this group of rivals. Like I said, I prefer this cast of main characters around me better than Gen 7 and Gen 6. Gen 5 was the last generation where I still think they're overall better. And even in some ways, I prefer Bede and Marnie over like Sharon and Bianca and and Hugh, right? And the reason why is because Bede is an asshole rival, but I love the turnaround with his character. He's definitely like, what is it? He's definitely Silver inspired in his dickishness. But like, I love the problem with Bede is I feel like a lot of people act like, oh well, they just, like I was watching Game Explains review, and I think I was watching like Ted from Brain Scratch on there talking about how it seemed like they kind of forgot about Bede halfway through the game, and I was like, no, the fuck they didn't. They told you literally what happened to Bede. He fucked up because he desecrated an important mural in Galar, and Rose wasn't having any of that shit. And so Rose was like, "Yo, that's it. You're cut out. You're gone." And even Beat says, and I think something that the player was thinking, you were kind of like Beat's like, "Yo, you're taking like the most extreme reaction to this. Like I can understand being reprimanded, but you're literally cutting me out of the challenge for something I was doing." Which he was doing for Rose. And as we find out later, that like Rose is the one who adopted him in a way to like, it kind of helped, it made Bede feel indebted to him. So everything that Bede was doing was for the sake of Rose. He wanted to like pretty much justify Rose's choice. Say that it wasn't like it, that I was worth saving in a way. And that's what part of me that makes me really enjoy Bede as a character. And the situation with Opal, I can understand people's issues with, because although to me it's pretty straightforward that Opal essentially became like the grandmother or like the parental figure that Bede never had. A lot of people took it as, oh, well, now we've just cut him out of the game for a while. But I'm like, that's kind of what needed to happen anyway. Opal essentially became his like guardian. And trained him and took him in. And although it probably started with this whole like pink obsession, you can tell by the time you run into him again at the end of like the championships or the Elite Four, whatever you want to call it, he's changed and he's grown as a person and he's calmed down, and he realizes that you yourself, the character, has kind of helped push him in the right direction, even though it was unintentional. Like the interactions he's had with you has led him through this, has also been like a thing that has led him through this journey, dealing with Rose and Olena and fucking Opal, and becoming like the new fairy gym leader to an extent. Like, you're like a driving force. I will say I do agree that you could have shown more scenes with him and Opal kind of building that, even if it was like, I feel like Pokemon's afraid to show like other characters interacting and having conversations that aren't directly tied to the main character. Oh, come on, I'm doing something. Oh, Jesus Christ. Every time, folks, every time. Anywho, I do agree that I feel like Pokemon's afraid to show like cutscenes of other characters and what they're doing while you're doing your journey stuff. I feel like that would have helped Bede's story a little bit, at least for I think the general audience. But for me personally, I understood exactly what they were doing and exactly what it was relating to. And actually, ironically enough, I think Marnie suffers the same thing. Now, I feel like people need to understand that Marnie's story is not the same as Hop's and Bede's, in the sense that Marnie didn't have to go through any character development. Marnie is a character in the story, but Marnie doesn't have like a real arc, because Marnie was already fine. Her arc actually takes place before this, about like the way she used to be and how her older brother, and I think a lot of people don't understand that, so they go, oh well, Marnie's bad. The only thing I agree with the complaints about Marnie is the fact that Marnie isn't shown enough, because that is an issue that I think the way Game Freak wanted to handle it is that Bede would be relevant the first half of the story, and then Marnie would be relevant the second half. Hence why Marnie has a lot of fucking like relevance towards the latter half of the game, even though her character isn't changing. She is still like prevalent in the latter half of the game, especially once we get to like the Chairman Rose stuff towards the end of the game. Her and Pierce specifically. I also think people need to understand what Team Yell is, because I feel like there's a misconception. A lot of people look at Team Yell as like a bootleg Team Skull. And in a way, you're not wrong, but people need to understand what I feel like the main difference is between Team Skull and Team Yell is. Team Skull's whole gimmick was the fact that essentially them being a part of Team Skull was their way to kind of lash out at the Alolan society, because the lore behind Team Skull is that they're a bunch of like throwaways. They're like the underside of like Alola's society. And so they kind of crowd around Guzma being the king of the losers of Alola. That's the whole premise of Skull. Whereas Team Yell's premise is honestly, I want my town to shine again. They want that recognition. And they know that Marnie is strong enough to get that recognition, but they want to help support the town they care about. So people like to talk about, oh, well, Team Yell was a roadblock here, and Team Yell was a roadblock there, and they serve no real purpose. You need to understand something. Team Yell is not Team Skull. I understand they have similar feels to them, but the general idea behind Team Yell is, I want to support my town. And Pierce is like a personification of that. That Pierce is like, yo, listen. Also, real quick, just want to throw it out as a side note. Game Freak, I don't know what the fuck it is with dark ghost gym leaders. You're good with them. Nanu, Acerola, fucking Pierce, Marnie. Love them. I love their like, not personification. What's the word I'm looking for? Their characterization. I love their characterization. Pierce and Marnie are great. And the fact that Pierce gets kind of a starring role in the post game kind of also leaves credence to that. But my point is, like, Team Yellow doesn't have the same kind of setup. So when that's why you had sequences of them being like weirdly nice, or like when they're concerned about the, what was it, the Dreadnought? I think it was the Dreadnought they were looking at on one of the bridges, and they kind of served as a roadblock. Like, Team Yell aren't inherently bad people. They're actually just a fan group. Not even like kind of a fanatical fan group. But I can appreciate Team Yell because I understand their motive. They want their town, they want Spike Mouth to be represented. And they think Marnie can get it the recognition it deserves. I mean, also, if anything, and it kind of gets into like my issue with the story as a whole. Because I do agree the Chairman Rose thing is not handled well. Alina, that whole section is not, it literally makes Rose come off as a weird psychopath where he's like, the world's gonna be fucked in the future, and Leon's like, well, that's fine, we can address it, but let's address it tomorrow after the damn tournament. And Rose, literally the plot just kind of boils down to Rose didn't want to wait the extra day. That shit is not handled well. But the one thing I think that would have really helped Pokemon in general as a franchise, and I think moving forward it should, is that Game Freak needs to understand something. I can understand if the main plot's gonna be this way, quote unquote, then the one thing you probably need to do is introduce side stories. It pisses me off. Like, one of the things I always complain about is that I feel like the gym leaders are like the most underutilized thing in the series, because you have these 8 characters that are always going to be prevalent in every game, and you barely wrap any story or characterization around them. The reason why I like Gen 5 so much is because Gen 5 made an honest effort to try to expand upon those gym leaders. Gen 7 did a I actually would say is an improvement in terms of the amount of characterization, although I feel like the problem with Gen 7 is Gen 7's story doesn't lend itself to do it as well as Gen 5's did. And Gen 8's is what I consider a middle ground, where it doesn't go the full 9 yards with like expanding upon the gym leaders, but it still makes an effort to have them be more of characters. That's why you run into the majority of them, except for the version exclusive ones like Bee, Alistair, Gordy, and Melanie. Those are the only ones you don't see outside of gyms other than like the intro cutscenes for them. But the problem I have with the way it's handled here is that, like, you run into Milo and he's herding sheep. You walk into Nessa just standing at a lighthouse. Kabu's training in a fucking tunnel, which I think is probably the more unique one. Of the first 3 gym leaders, Nessa's is literally, I walk to the lighthouse. Oh, I'll meet you back at the gym. No, that's why I call it a half step. It's like it's an improvement from like the traditional gym leader fare, but like I'm just meeting you at a lighthouse and then we have like a short conversation and then you go back to the gym. Like that's not how it works. And it's weird because there are elements to these characters in their trainer cards, like the fact that fucking Nessa is a model, like Elise is from Unova. But like, why not make a side mission into like the whole modeling aspect of her career? That's kind of cool shit. It never gets addressed or shows up. You just read it in a card. Another thing that could have been a cool side quest is Gordy and Melanie. You know they have their father and son for those who, mother and son for those who don't know. Melanie from S.H.I.E.L.D. is Gordy's mother from S.W.O.R.D. But because they're not in the same version, even though they both still exist within each game's canon, they never interact. You never see them interact. It's only alluded to in the league cards and the backstory behind the league cards. And the one thing I think that would really help is make optional side quests for these gym leaders and other characters, because it would help with the rivals too. You could have shown a side quest with Bede where you're helping him like train. You're helping him train at Opal's gym. It's not something you need to do, but if you felt the need to go backtrack, you could do it. But the game wants to do this singular story and have like this pseudo short post game, and then that's it. And I'm like, and I think in the core of the story aspect of Sword and Shield and in Pokemon in general is that like Game Freak is afraid to acknowledge that fucking Pokemon is an RPG. Do you know how much side stories would help? Just characterization and like story wise and post game content. If you just had like full fleshed out stories with these characters, you're using 3D models. Like take advantage of the side stories in these characters, things that could lead into an end game that would make the end game feel even better. But they don't fucking do it. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to address. But most of the other gym leaders I think handle their characterization relatively well. I think the best ones is probably Opal. Kabu's on there, even though it's the lesser of them, but it's still better than some of the other gym leaders. And probably Raihan. I think Raihan is used. Raihan in general. And that's the other thing that kind of irks me, is that even in the animations, that the gym leaders have way more personality just in their like Dynamaxing animations than like the majority of like Gen 6's gym leaders. So it's not like I don't feel like there's no characterization at all for them. I just want more because it's a $60 game and this is a fucking world and lore that is great. Some of the coolest things about Pokemon have nothing to do with battling. Just have shit to do with the character interactions. Like for example, spoiler, I'm curious, did you know that Claire and Lance are cousins? You wouldn't, because it doesn't come up at all in the games. Or I think it's mentioned in passing. Like there are like cool things that could be pushed forward that aren't, and that's my issue. Like I still like the story and I still enjoyed the story, and I personally enjoy it a little bit better than like Sun and Moon's story, because I feel like Sun and Moon's story, which to be fair, Sword and Shield suffers something similar, where they get to the final act and they just start rushing everything. Like the Lusamine Guzma thing, I think just gets rushed towards the end of the original Sun and Moon storyline, and I'm like, that's not great. Hell, it happens in X and Y, where X and Y does this thing where like the majority of the game, Lysander is barely relevant and like AZ's mentioned like once or twice. And then like at the end of the game, it's like, here we go. Everything. I think Sword and Shield's handled better than that, but like not by much. It's still, I feel like there's a drop off because I think they're so concerned with like a lot of the fans. And I think that's the other problem Game Freak has. A lot of their issues also stem from the fact that they don't want to change too much in order to piss off fans. But I'm like, you're going to piss off your fans regardless. So take the fucking risk. Make the fucking gamble. Because even like I said with Breath of the Wild committed itself to an idea and said, fuck it. And people can appreciate you putting in the effort more when they feel like there's a trade-off. The thing here is that you're still trying to please everybody, but also trying to make changes. Like, you're just not going to do it. But I think that's all I have to say as far as the story and characters. So we're gonna scroll back up and look at the chat and see what all I missed. Those are just like my general feelings. Like I like the story and characters of Sword and Shield. I like Hop. I like Marnie. I like Bede. The only other thing I wish is that Marnie had more like interactions with the rest of the group. Like you see Bede and Hop interact, but you don't really see Marnie interact with like Bede or Hop at all, and that kind of bums me out too. I just don't. Gen 7 for me, I enjoy the characters. I don't necessarily care for the story as much. I feel like Gen 7 also suffers that problem of trying to turn every little adventure into like this. We gotta save the world because shit's going crazy. Not saying Gen 8 didn't do that, but Gen 8's was a little bit. I don't know. Gen 8's didn't feel as ridiculous to me as like Gen 6's or 7's did, where it was like Gen 6 was like full on genocide, and fucking Gen 7's was like shit's going crazy. Um, that and I don't like the way they ended like Lusamine. Lusamine, like when you look at the fucking story beats for Gen 7, at the end of it all, it was like Lily had a mild conversation with her mother. You beat her in a Pokemon battle, and then she essentially goes into a coma. Guzma doesn't even get a proper ending in that game. It's just like if anything, he just serves as like a bullshit ass accomplice. What helps Gen 7 is that Gen 7 has a lot of like cool background lore that helps it kind of feel a bit more of a whole experience. But like the actual shit you do in that game, I just don't feel like correlates as much. But yeah, let me go back and scroll and see what you guys were saying. So, and then we'll talk about the gameplay. But I did want to address the story. Yeah, Pop started to ring when he's feeding by Bede. He's finding his way. Bede was just simply misguided, which I agree. Bede is misguided. Reviews. Sword and Shield to me is an improvement, but Sword and Shield also is a representation of Game Freak still being afraid to like double down on shit. Yeah, he got trained by Opal. Hey, look, Wandering Soul, that's cool if you agree with Ted. I just disagreed. I feel like it made more sense if they had never told you what was going on with Bede. But like it was obviously shown to you what was going to happen to Bede. Yeah, that's true. Black and White 2, but once again, like I said, Black and White 2 to me is the pinnacle of Pokemon games, whereas like Gen 6, 7, and 8 all have problems in some way, shape, or form. I get why they are going for it and what is presented, but they told didn't work for me. Well, I mean that's fine, Wondering. So if you don't feel that way, that's perfectly fine. I'm not here to like change minds. I'm just here to give my thoughts and opinions on it. I feel like that's well, yeah, but like Kuro, I understand what you mean when you say they reject challengers. Team Skull were rejected challengers, and Team Yell are Marnie's entourage. But for some reason, people still act like they're like Yell is supposed to be like Team Skull, and it's not. They're not even close. Because Team Yell, actually, if anything, that whole town is full of rejects in a way. But like Spike Mouth's premise isn't to fucking lash out at like the populace. Like Team Skulls is the fuck with the populace that rejected them, whereas Team Yells is like to boost up their own and to prove that their team, that their city is worth a damn. But the game doesn't portray that idea as well as it could have. I thought the game was okay. It's extremely easy, which killed my motivation to train my team. Team Yell was me. I missed the Rockets. I haven't, be real with you, most of the teams in Pokemon games aren't good. Like Team Flare was completely, Team Flare and Plasma, no, Team Flare and Galactic both suffer the issue of like their team is doing one thing and their leaders are completely fucking different. That's the reason why I hated the both of those teams. Skull, I think, has a lot of cool background stuff. I think the Guzma ending is what pisses me off about that. And then Rocket's okay. And Rocket will always be enjoyed to a degree. Team Aqua and Team Magma's only kind of interesting because of their ending, which is them realizing that neither of them knew what the fuck they were doing. And Team Plasma is my favorite. Let's see. Gym leaders were disappointing. They really should have went all in on the gym challenge, screwing the world-ending plots. I hope they add more story DLC. Honestly, I still agree with the idea that Game Freak should focus on this one game for 3 years instead of making a third version. But knowing Game Freak, that won't happen. But I'll get to that when I start talking about the game. The back half of the gym challenge is very weak. Gen 6 gym leaders should have had mega evolutions in their battles. That's true. They also should have had character. The only gym leader in Gen 6 that had character was a Karina and a little bit of Clement. In the console now, Gen 6 gym leaders should have mega. Okay. I think Hop is handled well. I don't think Gen 7 has the best story. I think Gen 5 has the better story. But I did like the approach to the Pokemon Gym Leaders in terms of like a sporting event. Yeah, I feel like Gen 8 made it feel like a full event. Like there was no way for me not to feel like shit was like everything was going on. It felt like an actual event, like a spectacle. You mean favorite gym leader? Oh, it's cool, Red Dragon. Favorite? You mean gym leader? Because team leader doesn't sound right. Gym leaders. If I had to go through the ones I enjoy the most, character-wise, I'd be. It's funny because I played Sword and I still have like a good connection with Gordy and Melanie, even though they're not hand. I like their lore more than I like the characters because they don't get to show off as much. I also kind of like Gordy's style. Gordy has like a very like rebellious teenager feel to him, and that's kind of why I like him visually. Um, I'm trying to think. Opal's really fun to watch. Raihan, I have a kick out of. Pierce is probably Pierce will probably be the fan favorite gym leader of this gen because it's fucking Pierce. Actually, Grimsley's another example of like a dark ghost kind of trainer being like I don't know what it is. Game Freak does that characterization really well. Um, I'm trying to think. Gordy, Alistair. I didn't interact with Alistair. B doesn't come out of her fucking gym. Who am I missing? Opal, Gordy, Pierce, Raihan. Yeah. I even like the implied rivalry with Pierce and Raihan. The fact that like Pierce, I think objectively is better than Raihan. The only thing that saves Raihan is the fact that Pierce doesn't Dynamax his team. That's the other thing I think is really cool. Oh, favorite evil team leader? If we're going for like pure evil, I can still respect the Giovanni approach, like the dangerous businessman. And then you got characters like Getsus, who I think is absolutely insane, that I enjoy. Lysander has a cool premise. I just don't give a fuck because of how late he's introduced. Lusamine suffers the same problem I think Lysander suffers. Guzma's a good, I would say, is one of the top tier ones. I think Guzma's handled well. His late game aspect of him is what ruins him a little bit. I'm trying to think of the evil team leader. Maxie and Archie don't stick out enough by themselves. Cyrus has an appeal to him too. He's kind of like a calm megalomaniac, which is part of the reason why I actually think Cyrus is a better version of Lysander. That's what Cyrus is. It's too bad his team fucking is inconsistent with him. What else? Yeah, I think that's the gist of it. Oh, it's your boy. I see what you did there. The best league champion. I think Cynthia's over. I think it's Steven, Cynthia. As much as I hate to admit it, because I don't fucking like Gen 4, Cynthia is probably the overall best champion. Um, Leon is probably top 3 though. Leon has, to me, Leon has definitely risen. Leon is probably up there. I don't know if I count Kukui as the champion. I think technically you're the champion of the Alola region. But I like to look at Kukui as the resident champion. But I don't feel like that's fair, so I don't count him. I would put him, he's up. I mean, when you compare him, you got what? You have Blue, Lance, Steven, because I don't count Wallace, because Wallace ain't shit to me. Cynthia, Alder, Iris, Diantha, and I guess you / Kukui. Leon, I would say, is pretty high tier. Leon is probably like top 3 in my opinion. Like I think my top 3 favorites are Leon, Cynthia, Steven. Not in that order, but they're definitely those are like my top three of the champions: Leon, Cynthia, and Steven. Because Leon also gets a lot of shine in there. It's just that like Leon, and I do like the whole. And I didn't even talk about Sonya or Marigold. Now Marigold definitely, I do like the approach in Gen 8's story involving those two because they do the whole like she's not the main, even though she's the professor of the region. The story is more about Sonya becoming the new professor of the region. So like I like the idea of it, but the problem is it ends up making Marigold seem pretty worthless. I mean, Lance is fine. Lance would probably be fourth. Like Lance is probably fourth. Lance doesn't stick out to me as much as Steven or Cynthia or Leon do, personally. Um, but yeah, I like the whole idea with Sonya and even Sonya and Leon sharing a relationship from the past when they were younger. I kind of wish it was delved into more. Once again, another place to put like a side story. Um, but yeah, I think that's all I really need to say. Oh, what's this? I read on Reddit that Rose was going to promote the use of diamond in the stadium. Well, I'm about to say Rose is just not handled well. Rose is probably like bottom tier as far as villains are concerned. Lance is the champion in Gen 2. Lance is the champion in Gen 2. Blue is the champion in Gen 1. Because by the time you get to the end of Gen 1, Blue's already champion. So Blue is the champion at Gen 1. So it's Blue, Lance, Steven, Cynthia, Iris. No, yeah, Cynthia, Iris, Alder. I just say Iris, even though Alder. I think Alder has the personality of a champion. Alder just doesn't have the battle skills of a champion. That's the problem I have with him. Diantha, who is to me fucking worthless. She's not terrible, just it's so like whatever with Diantha. That's my problem with Diantha. And then you got either you/Kukui, and then Leon. So yeah. But with all that being said, I guess we should get into the gameplay section. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna, like I said, hide the chat while I go through the gameplay section, and then the last section will be the conclusion. So I'm gonna hide the chat. You guys can still talk. I'm just going to be not looking at it as I go over the gameplay. So there's different aspects to this. This is the most controversial Pokemon game in a while. I think the most controversial titles in the series is probably 3, 5, and 8. Yeah, 3, 5, and 8 are probably the most. Like, even 7 was nowhere near this controversial. 7 was interesting, but it wasn't controversial. I think 3, 5, and 8 are the 3 most controversial generations. And to get into why that is, I mean, obviously with Gen 8, you know, it's the decks, it's the animations. For me, the most egregious thing of everything that happens in this game is probably the fucking level design. The level design in Generation 8, unfortunately, is another example of them not wanting to change the... I think the problem is they took the wrong criticism from Gen 7. Gen 7 got a lot of hate because of how tedious the beginning part of the game is. And when I say they misunderstood it, I think they took it as people didn't want to deal with the story. And that's not what it was. They didn't mind the story. Most people's issue had more to do with the pacing and the fucking overabundance of tutorials of this of Gen 7. And they took it as, well, we should cut down on the story, which is why I partially think the story suffers in this game, is because they took that criticism the wrong fucking way. So my main critiques with Gen 8 is that, for one, I thought Pokemon games had gotten absurdly easy. And I still think they're still a little too easy for their own good. I don't think it's as bad as Gen 6 and 7 was. I feel like Gen 7 was almost brain dead at certain points. Also because Gen 7 really didn't need any real challenge. Like, Gen 7 to me is just almost brain dead easy until you got to the League, I think. The League and Kukui were like the hardest parts of Gen 7. But by the time you got to them, it was like, yo, it's over. But I also think that's because of how Gen 7 structure was. Gen 6 was brain dead. The fact that you went into Gen 6's like league and almost every Elite Four member only had 3 Pokemon where you were still allowed to use 6, I'm like, what the fuck? And I think my problem with Gen 8 is that Gen 8 is another like middle road in the sense that Gen 8 does that thing where I think the beginning half of it can be surprisingly hard, but once you get your bearings straight, you can start speed blitzing the latter half of the game. Also, depending on what version you got, depends on how hard certain gym leaders are. Like, I've heard people It's weird. This is probably one of the most mixed games in terms of difficulty I've heard of, because like I've heard reports of how this game is easy as fuck, and then I've heard reports of people getting their ass whooped in this game, and I think it partially dealt with what gym leaders you fought, because I think Alistair is an inherently harder gym leader than fucking B, who uses a Pokemon type that has a variety of weaknesses that, considering what kind of Pokemon you can get early on in this game, you could steamroll B without even trying. Whereas like Alistair objectively is harder because ghost types are just harder to deal with. I think the same issue goes with Gordy and Melanie, where I think Melanie objectively is probably harder than. Well, that one's kind of hard. Like I said, I didn't fight Melanie, but I've heard people struggle with Alistair a lot. I probably would say that they're both kind of easy in their own rights, but I actually probably would say objectively, fucking Melanie's probably a harder gym leader as a whole. But I guess I should start from the beginning. I guess the main thing is to talk about is the variety of mons you have, because that's kind of a point of contention. So, Gen 5 was the last generation to double down on the idea of only having new Pokemon be catchable in the beginning part of the game. Like, if I remember right, Black and White did the thing where the beginning, like the whole game, except for the post game, you could only catch Mons from Unova. And then once you beat the main game, you could catch post game Mons from other regions. And people whined and bitched about this whole experience. To me, this is one of the dumbest fucking complaints the Pokemon fandom has. Why in the fuck would you want to go to a new region and these are the same people who talk about how new Pokemon games need to have new Pokemon, but then actively refuse the idea of catching new Pokemon. Why in the fuck would you do that? It's so fucking dumb. But Gen 5 was the last gen to do it, because and then people had such a negative response to that in Black and White 2 you could catch old Pokemon in the early game again. Gen 6 maintained it, Gen 7 maintained it, and to be fair, Gen 8 maintains it. The one thing I give Gen 8, and one of the things I think cutting the decks really did improve, is that the problem with Gen 6's early game and Gen 7's early game is that you could catch a bunch of Pokemon from older regions, but it would be like the same chunks of Pokemon. Like, the one thing I'll give, I think Gen 8 is also the first time you can catch wild, fully evolved Pokemon that can only evolve through trading. Like, you can run into Hypnotops, you can run into fucking Flareons, you can run into fucking Dusknoirs, you can run into fucking Gallades. These are Pokemon that have never been catchable in the wild, because the way you got them in the game was through the dumbass evolutionary process. But realistically, it's not so far-fetched to believe the idea that these Pokemon couldn't still be wild. Like, you couldn't find a wild Dusknoir. So one of the things I really do appreciate about Gen 8 is that the Pokemon variety is very different. It may not be unique in the sense that it still does the same, we gotta mix the old with the new, but the Pokemon you run into are Pokemon you just aren't used to running into early game. And I think the Dex cut made that experience more entertaining for me. That I could run into a fucking Axew before I got to the 4th fucking gym. That's insane to me. Or the fact that I ran into Yamask early. Or, I'm trying to give some good examples. I'm trying, like C-Dot was early game for Gen 3, but the fact that you can run into a Shiftry, or a fucking Quagsire, or well, Quagsire isn't too far-fetched. It's funny, because I haven't even mentioned far-fetched in general. I also appreciate the Pokemon choices, the fact that there's a lot more Gen 5 representation. I know a lot of people don't like that because Gen 5 doesn't have the most likable cast for a lot of people, but I appreciate the variety of the Mons we got. And that they weren't just the same old overabundance of Generation 1, 2, and maybe 3. Those were the gens that were overly promoted. And no offense, but I like a little bit more variety. Like maybe throw like how you could catch, and even the types you could catch. Like you could catch Nickit, which I think the last gen that allowed you to catch a dark type early game was like Gen 3, right? Gen 3 lets you catch Poochyena, and then I think you could, even Murkrow I don't think you could catch until like around the 4th gym or some shit. Like, most dark types weren't early game. I think ironically enough, Gen 3 and Gen 5 both had dark types that you could get early game. Like Purloin, you could get relatively early. So I appreciate having types that I could get relatively early. And then the variety of Pokemon you can catch early. Like, you can have like a full team of 6, and the fact that you get into the... Like, I like the structure of Galar and the Mons I could catch. Then obviously you go into challenge and leveling up. This is probably the most straightforward, streamlined game that I've ever fucking played. And I truly appreciate it because it makes me feel like they're not treating us like babies. The problem is they end up contradicting themselves by later treating us like fucking babies. And some of you would ask, how do they do that? Well, the first thing is that they're still doing this thing where they're afraid to have me fight full teams. Like, even the Elite Four in this gen still does that same fucking thing where they have like 5 Pokemon. And I'm like, bruh, this is not the fucking time. I also think Dynamaxing is cool in the sense that, like, it's not like insanely broken, but it definitely is not like, but they also restrict it. Like, it's not used in every fight. Because realistically, Gen 6 was a cakewalk because you had Dynamaxing at your fingertips. To be fair, Gen 8 has a similar problem in the sense that, like, I can max rate battle relatively early. But because there's still level gaps, you can't max rate, like, stupidly strong Pokemon. But the fact that you can get, like, experience candy means you have the potential to break the game early if you want to. That's kind of the trade-off with Gen 8. Gen 8 has the ability to be just as broken. It's just not as easy. Like, whereas, and some people go, well, it's pretty easy. I'm like, no, I think fucking Mega Evolution and the fact that they give you a Pokemon that Mega Evolves, actually they give you 2. Because you get the starter from Kanto in Gen 6. You could get the Mega Evolution Pokemon. They're given to you for free, and literally all it is, you press a button in battle and use it. And it lasts the whole fucking match. That was the problem. That's the problem I have with Gen 6 was brain dead. Now Gen 7 has Gen 7 had a similar issue. It was probably more with Pokemon and Me, where like you could essentially like love and carry your Pokemon to the point where they would be kind of broken in ability. And to be fair, you also have that ability in Gen 8, but it's not as like as easy as me tapping the bottom screen. Like, I had to go into the camp and collect items and shit to get my Pokemon to the same level of like emotional brokenness as you could get in Gen 7, where it's like, I shook off arrest because I love you. I shook off paralyzation because I loved you. I took a critical hit because I love you. Like, if you did the whole petting your Pokemon shit and feeding them, your Pokemon could become like broken as fuck for the main game. And like I said, you can still do it in 8, but 8 involves camping and collecting items to make curry and playing with them. Like, it's a little bit, I feel like it's a better middle ground than Gen 7, because Gen 7 made it so easy to get to that like you would just do it because it was there. Whereas camping, you more likely only did during like the Pokemon, during the wild area. But the main point of contention for me when it comes to Gen 8 is the fucking level design. That is like my one sore fucking area, and it expands to every aspect of the game. I think the 2 best in-route areas that aren't the wild area in terms of openness of design is probably the water area when you get the inflation device for your bike. That area is probably one of the better open areas in the game. And the other one is probably like the ruins area, which ironically is you going to the 6th gym whereas the water area is after you leave the 6th gym. And the reason why I say this is because even though the ruins area isn't like huge, it at least has different elevation changes, so it makes things a little bit more visually interesting to go through. But the reason why I have such an issue with the fucking level design is that, and it all kind of stems back to HMs, all right? So here's the thing with HMs. HMs, the premise behind them originally was to gate progression, but it was also to promote exploration. So like you would get an HM and then you could use it to obviously progress, but you could also use it to explore previously locked off areas. So it was like a mixture of a progression gate but an exploration gate. It's one of the reasons why the later games use all this extra shit like Skull and Yell and Psyducks and shit, blocking roads and shit, because HMs became less and less prevalent. The problem with HMs, the HMs hindered gameplay innately by forcing you to make permanent moves a part of your moveset, or have Pokemon that were only specifically designed to get for exploration, which are both terrible fucking ideas. That I had to lose a slot on my team to have a Pokemon dedicated to exploration, or sacrifice movesets for the sake of exploration. Both of these options sucked. And then the later gens, like Gen 6 and 7, did the whole ride Pokemon thing, or did like Gen 5 and made HMs completely like optional. Like in Gen 5, you barely have to use, you're barely required to use HMs for progression. But then you question, why are they fucking here if I have to put them to the side? But the problem I have with ride Pokemon is that ride Pokemon don't feel that natural with it. But ride Pokemon, like literally in the games, they just appear and now you can do the thing. They were more like items and creatures that were helping you. And I'm like, both of these things are dumb. They also didn't logically make any fucking sense, because if trainers had to go this route to get to an area, why the fuck do I have to recut down a tree or remove a block? Because bunches of trainers are coming through the same area. So it seemed fucking stupid. So Gen 8, I think, is the best implementation of the evolution of the traveling ability, which is implementing it into shit you already have. Like the fact that the Corviknight thing is a taxi feature, which makes way more sense than me just being able to... I mean, the fly feature was never the worst implemented one, but it's still cool to have it more as a traditional taxi feature. The fact that my bike is back and I can use it as a flotation device, which means surfing no longer has that dumb, I walk up to the edge of a landmass, press A to tell me that there's water here, press A again to be like, do you want to use the surf? Press A again, watch the animation of the surf, and then I can ride on this generic ass Pokemon model on the water. Now I can just ride my bike on this bitch. That is great. My problem is that you didn't change the fucking levels to incorporate the idea that I have all these abilities. One of the best examples is, and one of the coolest examples is that, like, they made escape rope a permanent item. It's now like a key item, which means you will never not have it. But why in the fuck would you make a goddamn escape rope a permanent item when there's only 2 dungeon-like areas in the game and they're both short as shit? Why in the fuck would you do that? It's like you made all the proper changes to update the design, but you didn't update the fucking level design for it. So when people make fun of this game and call it the Corridor Hallway game, which is the same as Gen 7, which is the same as Gen 6, they all the 3D games suffer from this hallway ass design in a branch. It's like here's the main route and here's like a deviation, but the deviation is like a few feet, or like another deviation which is a few feet. One of the worst things is, I think in one of the areas there's a small, they're all small deviations by the way, but you could do one of these small deviations and then someone's like, oh, you're the curious type, and you're like, fuck off. This is not even curious. It's like going in your house, going down the hallway of your house, and then turning off into your room, and then coming back out and going through the rest of the hallway trying to get to the front door. Like, it's not like true exploration. Why are these areas so short? And you put less trainers here too. So it's like, fuck. These are the things that I'm like, you fixed the design. You got the design down. Having my bike have a bunch of upgrades in it, like maybe in a new game or in an update to this game, it can get buzzsaw so you can cut down trees. That shit would be cool as fuck. You know what the problem is? It doesn't matter if when I cut down the tree, the area I get access to, it's like a circle. It's like going into a fucking, oh, what's it called? In a neighborhood. Like a cul-de-sac, I think. I think that's what it's called, a cul-de-sac. It's like driving into a cul-de-sac. It's like an inlet area, but it's nothing like crazy. That's my fucking problem. You updated the fucking mechanics, but you didn't change the level design to incorporate the new mechanics. You gave me a bike that can travel on water, but there's barely any water areas in the game. That is like my least fucking favorite thing. I think the difficulty's fine. I think they should give me an option for a hard mode or a hardcore mode, because I think a lot of Pokemon fans would play it and give me multiple saves files. That's another thing that probably needs to be added. But that fucking level design, yo. RPGs should never take 20 hours. That's what like a normal game would take. And to be fair, I think for me, Sword and Shield takes more like somewhere between like 25 and 30 hours. But I know like a lot of people could beat this in 20 hours. And my whole thought process is just like, yo, give me bigger areas to explore with this cool ass thing. You could also make puzzles around it because it's a part of my natural moveset. So you don't have to worry about a Pokemon being on me at the time to use the puzzle. That's my fucking issue. The difficulty, I think, has hit a nice balance considering everyone kind of fluctuates between it being too hard and easy, and they don't. I think that could still have some tweaking in it, but the main thing is that you now have fixed all the design issues in terms of your character and his moveset. The thing you need to fix now is the fucking level design, and it should have been already in there. The wild area suffers from this too, because even though it's a big area and has a lot of different spaces, there should have been dungeons and shit in this area. It shouldn't have been like I'm just traveling around this giant landscape and that's it. Like, make some ditches, make some fucking tunnels and shit I can go through. You have like make some like broken down houses that fit into the lore of Galar. That's what I'm talking about. This is the shit I do agree with when people say this game doesn't feel like a complete game. The game, it's not that it doesn't feel like complete, it feels like they just copied the same design from Sun and Moon and just used it again. And I'm like, bruh, no. Because the older games had more expansive areas. And them bitches were 2D. They had an excuse not to be expensive. You have no excuse. So that's like one of my main complaints. The fucking level design is just, it's too short. If I like to explore, there's nothing there for me. It's literally like, it's like, look, there's a Coulter. All right, back on the main path. That's a shame. I think the difficulty's fine. I like the Pokemon variety. There are things to like here. I just, that level design really bugs me. So, I think gameplay I'm cool with. The move changes I'm fine with. I noticed that status effects happen more consistently in this gen, which makes things a little bit more interesting. And I like the fact that they really did try to cater to the competitive side by adding in different moves to change the meta up. So that's the part of me that recognizes that Game Freak is still trying. I don't like to hear that shit that Game Freak isn't trying. Game Freak is definitely trying, but they're afraid to double down. I think it's a lot of fear. It's a lot of fear that they're afraid, and I'm like, yo, you can't do that because your franchise will suffer for it. You have got to double down on some new shit. That has to happen. And that's what's fucking them up. So yeah, now I'm gonna go look up at the comments. I'm just gonna go check the comments, but that's like my main thing. So we're gonna scroll back and see how much I missed. Let's see. Yeah, the over leveling, I think it depends on the person. That's why I thought the leveling is actually relatively balanced. The fact that I got people complaining and also saying, man, this game is tough. I also appreciate the fact that there's more metagame tactics from the AI in this game. I can appreciate that. So it's not like I don't like the idea of saying that Game Freak isn't trying. I also dislike that you don't actually fight a lot of the trainers during the game. The main gameplay loop is mostly ignored, which is odd as hell. Oh, you mean like your fellow challengers? I can understand that. Yes, I do remember Pokemon Coliseum. I like that game, although that game is tedious as fuck. Yeah, Ice types aren't that hard to beat. Like, I think Gordy and Melanie are like a fair trade-off, whereas I think B and Alistair, in terms of difficulty, Alistair would be considerably harder than B. B is like a fucking joke. Yeah, like I said, I think Black and White 2 is a good mix of Black and White 2. I think was like it was a way of catering back to the fans, but it wasn't like the same shit. Also, what's up, Static? It's the Pokemon Sword and Shield review. Garbodor got some love. That's the other one I forgot. I like them to try the black and white approach again. Once again, take a risk. I think, and the main reason why I think they won't do it, or the reason why they're hesitant to do it, is because Black and White 1 didn't sell as well as the other titles, and people hated on Black and White for a while. Like, Black and White got so much shit when it came out, and it was stupid. Rain is more broken in Gen 8. Dynamaxing is just not that visually interesting. I can understand that. Megas were broken. You had Kanto starters in the car. Yeah, Gen 6 was a broken ass game. I always held off Dynamax until the last Pokemon Gym Leader, which is what most people would do. I actually like to try them, add something to the battle system that would stick. Actually, I think that's like Gen 6's like only claim to fame is the fact that you introduce Fairy type, which I think has actually been a genuinely good addition to the series. Whereas everything else I think Gen 6 has is fucking garbage. Yeah, I understand it thematically. It just mechanically didn't sit well with me as much. This gen I appreciate because it didn't feel like a cakewalk. Yeah. Like when people say this is the easiest gen, you're out of your fucking mind. Gen 6 is a joke. Gen 6 is probably the easiest generation. Corviknight is a terror. Corviknight is a fucking beast. It's ridiculous. Gen 8 hallways are actually just objectively worse than Gen 6 and 7. No. They're not. How are they? I'm curious about that point. Why are they objectively worse than 6 and 7? When 6 and 7 has the same exact level design. Like, literally, it's the same level design. They're all bad. Like, there's no way 6 and 7 are better. Wait, Gen 6 had more caves. Try to make sure that's true. 1, 2. I guess that is technically true. Although their caves were designed almost in the same fucking way. That probably is true. But the design is literally the same. There's no inherent difference. Fuck, where am I at? They seem to rely on making more competitive scene more user friendly and forgot the main aspects of the game. To a degree, yeah, that's literally what it is. This is actually the more for the core fans, except the core fans like the lore and shit. Then you take a book out of Molotov and make areas like wild areas. Wait, but Gen 8 barely has that. Gen 8 barely has any loading in it. Like when you leave an area in Gen 8, you just walk out of an area. There's a few exceptions to that, but like most towns, it's not like a dun dun. Like you just walk into the area. So I don't agree with that. Like in Gen 8, the only time that it happens is when you're going in and out of like the wild area. And maybe when you walk in the stores. That's it. And stores and buildings. But like it's still pretty interconnected. Like I can walk out of Hammerlock to like a route and be perfectly fine. Yeah, I did read the chapters. I can understand that, Red Dragon. That's another thing where I wish they would add more like side stories. Blank and White one made like 1 million less than everyone gen. I don't understand that logic. Because it was the last gen to get the same vitriol online. Like its online hate was strong, and that's what irked me about Gen 5. That Gen 5 was a really good gen, but Gen 5 people had to like the story's bad because the villain Gets is a bad villain, and the anime and it was handled poorly. A lot of the new Pokemon designs are uninteresting. Like it was it's almost like Gen 8 in the sense that like Gen 8 made money, but like Gen 8 has like the most vitriol against it. It's almost the same thing, except that Gen 5 made a little bit less and still had a lot of hatred towards it. Nothing like insane, but it still had a pretty good amount of hate towards it. Let's see. They got kind of changing in Black and White 2. Got all those anime cheeses. I don't agree with that. I'm trying to think of Gen. I'm just thinking of Gen. Gen 6 has certain sections, but not like when I'm trying to think back to Gen 6's level design. Gen 6's level design is not that different. And Gen 7's I think is literally the same. Like Gen 7 has almost the exact same level design. Gen 6 has a little bit of variation, but it wasn't a lot. But I'll give Gen 6 a little bit of credit. I think Gen 6 has certain sections that are better, but like overall as a package, it doesn't help. I mean, that's just a different in taste, Wandering Soul. Like for me, I feel like Gen 8 is connected fine. I don't have any issues with it. I just wish the areas were more expansive. I agree with I wish they were more expensive and that they weren't afraid of dungeons. It's like you fixed all like I said, my Gen 7's core Gen 8's core issue is that Gen 8's fixed all the like deep mechanical issues but didn't change the level design to reflect the changes in the mechanical issues they fixed. Like they still have the level design as if they still have the same problems as the other games, and they don't. And that's the problem. You didn't change the level design. What? In what way? In what way is Gen 6 visually interesting to look at? I mean, to be fair, Wander, so we're just not gonna agree on that. It's actually that'd probably be easier, but like Gen 6 visually interesting. No. I think it has a decent layout, but visually interesting, not so much. For me personally, not so much. That's just the difference of the standards. Like Gen 6 has a lot of love because of its historical relevance in it being the first game, being the first 3D mainline game. But like for me personally, like Gen 6 does not hold up for shit, like at all. Personally, like I already know if I ever go back and replay that game, I'm not looking forward to it in any way, shape, or form. Let's see. I wish they made Kanto. Yeah, that was the main, and actually, like Gen 6 just has a bunch of problems. And Gen 6 to me was when Pokemon, like that was the laziest mainline game in my opinion. Gen 6 is the laziest mainline game. Now I understand. Now a lot of people would disagree with that because they did have to that was the game they first made the 3D models in. But I'm like the whole game suffered because of that though. Like the modeling, that was if there was any of the mainline games that needed to be delayed, it was Gen 6. Gen 6 got a pass because it was the first 3D title, but realistically, that pass doesn't mean shit in the grand scheme of things because as newer games come out, that game will not age. That game ages worse and worse. That game ages worse and worse and worse. For me, but like I said, I just don't think we're gonna agree on my opinion on Gen 6. because I generally do not like Gen 6. And I'm not talking like I didn't put time in Gen 6. I could go get my 3DS. I put like almost 400 hours in that game. So like it wasn't like I didn't play that game at all. I played that game pretty religiously. And my least favorite thing about it is the main fucking story. It doesn't stick out. I hate the rivals. Really hate the rivals. I think Shauna and Serena are the only two shining spots, and it takes so long. Well, I can't really comment on the UK correlation because I don't have a lot of experience with the UK. Ugh. Well, yeah, Gen 6 would have benefited from a third game or, proper post-launch support. That would have helped it too. But we're already an hour into it, so I'm going to get into my final conclusion. Give me one sec. So, here's my main critiques, and these are things that I think would make Gen 8 a better game entirely. So, here's my thing. Let me hide the chat for this last time because I still need to go to the gym and I still have to work tomorrow, so that's why I can't be on here for another like hour and a half. Shit, that was not what I wanted to do. All right, here we go. Also, because I think I'm losing my voice because I've been talking so much. So, Gen 6, I mean, not Gen 6, Gen 8, if I had to rank it, because that's what we're going to do. So, I need to give you what my top of the bar is and then my bottom of the bar. I'm going to rank it within the new generation games. Because I feel like that's a different tier than the handheld games. Like, Gen 5 is the top of the handheld games. Like, there is no question to me that Gen 5 is the best of the first 5 gens. There is no argument to me about Gen 5 having the best generation. To me, there isn't. Gen 6, 7, and 8. Gen 6 is the worst. Gen 7 and 8 are probably the closest to me. Where I still prefer Gen 8, but you couldn't make the same argument as you could with Gen 5. Like, I think Gen 5 objectively just has way more to it, whereas, like, Gen 8 isn't what I consider, like, insanely better than Gen 7. And that's kind of the fucking problem. That Gen 8 isn't that much of a difference from Gen 7. And that's the core. I feel like Game Freak was afraid to take risks. Or not living for that. I think Game Freak was afraid to double down on the risks it was taking. I feel like Game Freak is stuck in a really shitty design cycle with the anime and the card game, which unfortunately I think makes it suffer as an overall product. I think Game Freak is too concerned about putting out third versions of titles, even though historically they never do better than the original, which is why most people would say just double down on the main fucking game. Because realistically, I think a lot of what it would help Gen 8 is adding DLC areas like explorable dungeons for the hardcore fandom, or fucking having a lot of side quest DLC. I would play a fuck ton of side quests involving Bede and Marnie and Hop and Milo and Nessa and Kabu and Opal and B and Alistair and Gordy and Melanie and Pierce and Raihan and Leon and Sonya and Rose and Olena. I would be 100% down for story-based post-launch content. And my main critique is that you are going to need to take the risk. You're going to need to sit down, bucket your feet into the ground, bury the motherfuckers, and be like, we are going to have to make a reckless fucking game. And we're going to have to bank on that game. We're going to have to bank on our ability to put out the title that deserves to be made. They need to be open to taking bigger... Fuck these baby steps. You are fucking adults. Make an adult-ass game. Make a 40 to 60-hour campaign. Put in a bunch of side quests, a bunch of lore, and give Pokemon responsible breaks. I don't need to see another mainline title for at least 3 to 4 years. At least. Unfortunately, because of how Game Freak and how fucking the Pokemon Company runs that brand, that won't happen. So the trade-off you can do is put out a bunch of DLC for it. Put out some plot-related DLC, put out some gameplay-related DLC, put out some extra dungeons, that kind of shit. But do not sit there and do this dumb shit again where you put out a half-step game. Now, the law of, I forget what the law is, but like the idea is that eventually they will catch up to modern standards because the progression of modern standards is slowing down. So eventually they'll catch up. But the problem is more and more people won't care. You're burning out. Pokemon is a franchise that is meant to appeal to everyone. You should not be burning out your old fans while gaining new ones. You should be keeping your old fans like involved while also gaining new fans. Pokemon just needs to fucking. I still like the game. I like it a lot. I have a lot of fun with the game. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and pretend like I don't. I enjoy the fuck out of this game. There's a high chance that this game will become up there for me. Right now, I don't know. It has a lot of modern conveniences that kind of puts it ahead of some of the other titles just for that reason. But in terms of like an experience and how I felt playing it, I'm just like, you were so close to greatness and you just wouldn't make the full hop over. It's like, how do I put it? It's almost like playing, it's like going down the stairs, but it takes you 5 minutes when it takes me like a minute. What's going on? For every step I make, you're like making only, for every 4 steps I go down, you're only going down 1 step. And I'm like, fuck, I see the effort. I really do. I see the effort, Game Freak. But realistically, I have no obligation to wait for you. And I think that's the problem they need to acknowledge. As fans, we are not obligated to wait for you to get your shit together. We are obligated to do what the fuck we want. And what they need to understand is that realistically, people just don't want to wait on you to catch up to modern standards because of how the company is ran. That's why I said post DLC would help. Story DLC, gameplay DLC, balance changes throughout the game would totally help. And it would be better than you putting out another fucking title that is Pokemon like, I don't know, Lance or some shit that just has a bunch of like improvements that the main game should have had. Or it turns into Ultra Sun and Moon where it has the challenge, but like no one gives a fuck because the story's the same. Like, RPGs just aren't meant to come out this frequently. That's the main thing. Like, RPGs do not need to come out this frequently. So make your first foot the best foot. Either make a highest quality main game or support it properly going into 2020. And not just the max rate battles. I mean, like, as an experience. Support it properly. Yeah, I think that's it. So for me, I think it's the best of the modern games. If that's the short version is, I think it's the best of the modern games. I think it's better than Gen 6, and I think it's better than Gen 7. I just don't think it's insanely better than Gen 7. And that's probably this problem. But like but if you're asking me as a fan, I still enjoy the fuck out of it. I still had a lot of fun with it. I like the characters. I like the world. I like the setup. I like the build up. I like the wild area. I think the wild area is fun. I like the advancements to my bike and using the Rotom for like different HM abilities, but also knowing which ones to cut the fuck out that don't matter, like the item finder. Fuck that shit. I don't care. But I hate the fact that it doesn't have representative lore. Not as much lore as it could have. I hate the fact that the post game is kind of short. I hate the fact that the game doesn't have like long or wide areas or enough dungeons. It's a fun game and I enjoy it. But Jesus Christ, you can do better, and I know you can fucking do better. Well, that's fair, Snowy Taco. That's a fair critique. It still feels like an up-res 3DS game in some aspects. Not completely, Yeah. Okay, so Wandering Soul ranks it as 2 equals 5, which is, I do not agree with. I like Gen 2, but I don't think Gen 2 touches Gen 5 to me. Gen 3, 1, 4, 7. I guess you're saying 7 is way better than 8, and 8 is way better than 6. Um, let's see. What else am I missing? Well, no, I don't have Shield. I never played Shield, so I don't. I never fought Melanie on that. Um, Gen 6 only had 2 main games. I like Gen 6 because it's 7. I don't think I remember each other. What about Gen 2? Yeah, I agree. And try it. Just focus on one game. Don't do this fucking announcing another game shit. Like, Pokemon does not need to be this frequent, and that's the problem with. Yeah, like Gen 8 has too many good points to me. And I guess if I had to rank the May games, it probably would be, let's see. Gen 5 is my absolute favorite, so it'd probably be Gen 5. I love the exploration in Gen 3. It'd be Gen 5, Gen 3. I don't care. Probably Gen 5, Gen 3. Gen 7's always ended up in the middle for me. My bottom 3 is like Gen 1, 6, and 4. Like Gen 1 is my least favorite. Gen 6 is right there. And then Gen 4 is right there too. I just don't like going through those games' stories. Those are my bottom 3. My top 3 is probably Gen 5, Gen 3. I don't see. That's the problem. Is I don't know where to put 2, 7, and 8 are my weird ones. 7's probably gonna be middle of the road. 7's probably like my 5th or 4th. The question is if I like 2 more than it. I probably do. It'd probably be Gen 5, 3. I want to say 5, 3. Fuck. I like 8 more than 7, so it might be 5, 3, 8, 2, 7, 4, 6, 8. I mean 4, 6, 1. One is more so me being burnt out on it. So I guess to quickly write that down, it would be. Let me scroll down and put it here. It'd be 5, 3, 8, 2, 7, 4, 6, 1. I think that's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. That's my order. I think that's my order. Gen 1 I'm just burnt out on. I think 2's middle of the road for me. 6 I absolutely can't stand. 4 I don't enjoy that much. I can respect 4, but I just don't enjoy 4 that much. And to be fair, 8 might drop. I mean, Generation 8 is still going on, but if I'm talking about the main games, Black and White is great. It's not that I weren't big on Heart Gold, Soul Silver. It's just that like I enjoyed those games, but I don't count that as Gen 4 in the same sense. Like when I'm talking about Gen 4, I'm talking about Diamond, Pearl, Platinum. When I'm talking about Gen 5, it's Black and White 1 and Black and White 2. Gen 3, it's Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. 8 could change. I think my biggest issue is probably 8, 2, and Gen 8's 2 and 7 can flip. I don't think 7's going to change much, but Gen 2 and 8 might flip. I don't know. But I think that's where I'm at. Because I like 8. 8 is a lot. Like, I like 8's cast, and I like 8's cast is like one of my favorite. Because I don't like Gen 7's cast that much, and Gen 2's cast don't stick out. Like, I like certain characters from Gen 7's cast, but I actually like the gameplay. I think that's really what hurt 7. 7, I just like the gameplay of the traditional games more. But I also prefer playing 7 over like 4, 6, and 1. Like, I would go back to Sun and Moon before I go back to fucking Sinnoh, Kalos, or Kanto. So that's why I say I enjoy 8 more than other people do. Bruh, I don't know how the fuck. Gen 4 I know is a fan favorite that I just don't agree with. I can respect it, but I personally, Gen 4 is such a fucking slog is the reason why I would never put it that high. That's my problem with it. 2 I can understand being relatively high. I'm actually surprised that 2, 3, and 1 are so low, Red Dragon. Jesus Christ. And 8 right now is 8 and 7 are your middle of the road games. Which makes sense. I wouldn't put 6 that fucking high either. I'm not saying Soul Silver. I mean, I played Soul Silver. I fucking love Soul Silver. But, like, when I'm talking about Gen 2, I'm talking about its OG representation. Yeah, Gen 8, I think Gen 8 will probably stay in the middle right now until time passes. And then I'll see how Gen 8 is going to be, how does it age? Because Gen 7, it was something similar. The fucking Diamond Pearl is so slow. Nah, I still don't like the way Gen 4 is designed either. Like the fucking the HM Hell. Gen 3 and 4 are the worst two with the HM Hell. And Gen 4 is to me way fucking worse. Fuck that mountain. That's all I'm going to say. But with all that being said, it's been almost an hour and a half. It's almost 5:30 here in East Coast. I still need to go to the gym, and then I need to take a shower, and then I still need to review the Sword and Shield or Pokemon 2019 episode. So, with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for the support. Hope you guys enjoyed. Merry Christmas! Enjoy the time with your family. And I hope you all have happy holidays. And all your dreams come true. I have to go. So I'll catch you guys later. Later days. And peace. Oh, ha, 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 ha. I'm out this bitch.